That does it? It's good? Okay. Thank you. We have been saved. Liberation refers to the freeing of the soul from the clutches of the illusory energy. But very specifically, it's a technical term that's there not only in Krishna consciousness but in other traditions. Like, for example, in the in the academic world, same term is used, liberation, and always refers to the leaving of the material terrestrial existence and going to the spiritual side. In Christian tradition they call it heaven, we say spiritual world, etc. You guys are being bored. How come you're not singing with the other kids playing instruments and stuff? Huh? Oh, really? Now you have to suffer. It'll come to an end. Don't be despondent. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Liberation. And so, first thing that we have in this 15th chapter is an image described to us, image of a tree, and specifically of a banyan tree. Now, there's not that many banyan trees in the West, but well, in Southern California I have actually seen quite a few, but they're sort of hard to recognize because they trim them. And in India there's a lot of banyan trees. At least I have seen a lot of banyan trees in India. How many of you have seen a banyan tree? Okay. There's something very peculiar about the banyan tree. Do you know what's so special about banyan tree in its physical appearance? Yes. Branches grow down. They grow up, but some of them grow downward. And when they reach the ground, they take root. And so the tree over time develops several trunks. And if it's not trimmed, it can turn into a forest. One tree can turn into a huge mess. So there's description, this chapter begins with a description of that tree, and that tree is said to be standing upside down. That the branches are going downwards, and then the roots are upwards. And then the branches that in a regular banyan tree go downwards and take root, they actually go upwards. And it said that this tree is very difficult to navigate. When a person enters this tree, he becomes so entangled in the tree that he cannot come out. Now, for the sake of brevity, I will not go into great details here, but just a couple of things that are going to give us a clue about this tree. One thing is said that that the branches of this tree, there are branches and there are twigs. And some are described, one are described as the senses and the other as sense objects. In other words, as the senses and sense objects interact, a sensation of pleasure is produced or pain. And according to some other statements in the Bhagavad Gita, which by now to reader would become obvious, the pleasure and the pain have the same goal, have the same purpose, which is material pain and the material pleasure have the same purpose, which is to bewilder the soul. Sarva bhutani sammoha sargayanti parantapa ichadvesha samutena. Thank you. Material pain and material pleasure have the same purpose. And they achieve this person, pain achieves this person by distracting the person. If you examine the consciousness of a typical person within this world, maybe even our very selves, from the moment we wake up or get up till the moment we go to bed, we're constantly thinking in two terms. What's a pleasant thing to do and what's an unpleasant thing to avoid? And in this way, we are constantly thinking about this world. We never come to think about liberation. And not only that day after day goes by, but lifetime after lifetime go by. Because the person is constantly thinking in terms of how to grab some pleasure and how to avoid some pain. Nearly constantly. And if you were to examine your thoughts, to the extent one is not Krishna conscious, to that extent, thoughts are exactly like that. And so time just goes by. And it's interesting, it's like waves, and every person is constantly having problems. Everyone's having problems. And so the person is simply trying to solve it. Now my children need to go to school, now my husband got sick, now my wife is pregnant, now one problem after another. And then the person is constantly thinking of these problems, trying to avoid pain. How to solve these problems? My insurance premium went up by $20. That actually happened. Okay, let's get done with that. Thank you. And so that's the pain. And the other half of the time is spent thinking about how to grab some pleasure. And it's hard to say which one takes up more of one's time and more of one's attention. But at the end, the whole life has gone by. And like this, lifetime after lifetime. And this is the illusion. So this is what this tree is composed of. These twigs and branches that interact in this kind of a fashion. And wherever we turn in this world, that's what people do. And it's so hard to penetrate this cycle, to make him stop, and to think about that which is actually important, liberation. And then it is stated that this tree is reflected on the water of desire. Because we desire in terms of this tree, in terms of this material world, we stay within this tree. This tree actually does not exist, but it's a reflection. And it reflects itself on the water of our desire. In other words, as the desire changes, so this tree also changes. Because we desire a certain way, this tree exists. And it's a very complicated tree. Yeah. From the moment one is a child to the moment one is old. There's nothing else going on in this world, with the exception of a few. Very, very few. Even in the religious domain, unfortunately, people only think in these kind of terms. Very few people, even in the religious domain, manage to penetrate through this illusion. So that's why it's said that this tree is a formidable tree. And it's very complex. Just 1 second here. I want to make sure I don't leave out some details. Now, what's interesting about this tree is that it's stated to be a reflection, and very specifically a perverted reflection of a real tree. So Krishna says there is a real tree, but the tree that we're experiencing is simply reflecting on the water of our desire. So there's a real tree, and this tree, according to this chapter of Bhagavad Gita, is in the spiritual world. And so it's going upwards, but its base is in touch with the physical creation. And then in this physical creation, this tree reflects on the water of our desire. So it's upside down. And now what's interesting about this, as it reflects, it's upside down. That means that everything that exists in the real tree also exists in the reflection, but it is upside down. And it's a reflection. Like if you pick an apple from a tree, it can be quite tasty. Well, actually, most people buy apples, so apples are nothing exciting typically, but real homegrown apples are quite sweet, without pesticides and stuff. But if you pick an apple from the reflection of the tree on the water, what do you get? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You just get frustration. So the happiness in this world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Relationship. Could you guys sit in the back, not to talk right in front of me? Yeah. It's that way you'll be happy playing in the back and you won't be disturbing me. Just go all the way down there. So I don't hear you and I won't be disturbing you and you won't be disturbing me. So we'll be very happy. We'll have a peaceful existence. Well, there are many more things we could say to try to convince someone about the nature and the existence of this tree. But anyhow, that's not quite the point of this presentation. And those who would like to be convinced, they can just read the Bhagavad Gita. And all the lectures that take place here have one exclusive purpose, which is to communicate to the people that there is a real world and that there is a reflection world. Maybe I'll say one more thing, like relationships, for example. Relationships with objects, relationships with people, situations, relationships with ideas in this world are perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And so they tend to be everything but perfect. Because they're perverted reflection. And so, therefore, they cause frustration. Now, Ashvatam enam suviruddha moolam. Krishna says that mula means root. Suviruddha. Su means it's an intensifier. Viruddha mula means that it's deeply rooted. This tree is strongly rooted. And first, it's difficult to even get out of it. That's the nature of children, no problem. As long as adults don't do that. It is strongly rooted, and there is one thing by which one can free oneself from this tree. Does anyone perhaps remember this detail? Very well. Actually, knowledge is not mentioned, but detachment is. Yeah. That this tree has to be cut down. There is no... And this is very interesting because most people think that the problems of this world can be solved, and they try to solve these problems. But according to this, we are not being told to try to solve material problems. We're told to cut this whole tree down. I remember once I was in Los Angeles, Santa Monica Beach. We were chanting Hare Krishna in public. And I was going back to the vehicle. And then a person with a microphone and a person with a camera intercepted me and asked me what I thought about the traffic and specifically parking situation in Los Angeles. This whole tree has to be cut down. They think if they fix the traffic and parking situation in Los Angeles, then life will be good. Just one example. The other day I was speaking with a friend, and he was telling me how his phone, his iPhone very specifically, was not working well, and he was being very frustrated. And then I laughed and I said, just see the first world problems. Do you understand that? First world problems. And what's interesting, there are people, what we have come to sometimes call as third world. In those parts of the world, people have barely enough food to survive. And they have problems. And over here, he has food. He's not hungry. He's got food and money and all kinds of things, but he also has problems. And in this way, everyone in this world has problems. And the intensity with which he was experiencing the problem of his phone not working was the equal intensity of the pain that the hungry people somewhere in a poor part of the world are experiencing. Same thing. Because everyone in this world has problems. And so some people think that if I fix one thing and then another thing and a little bit of traffic and then everything will be fine. Even Srila Prabhupada thought like this. He thought before he met his spiritual master that unless India is freed from the British governance, then nothing else has value. But his spiritual master didn't think so. He thought that everything of this world just needs to be ignored. And one should focus on that which is important. And so similarly, here we have the idea that there's no need to try to solve the problem of this tree. It's unsolvable. What one has to do in order to solve, there's just no solution to material problems because this domain is made by God as such. Problematic. And the way to solve the problem is to run away from this problem. And that is called liberation. And so therefore here it said that this Ashvata tree is strongly rooted and has to be chitva, cut down by Shastra, by the weapon of asanga. Asanga literally means to not be in contact with. Srila Prabhupada said that the best way to control the mind is to ignore it. So the best way to deal with this world is to ignore it as much as possible. And focus on that which is actually important, namely Krishna consciousness. And then we come to that point. Then it says, Tata Padam. From that position. So once having cut this tree down, in that point, one ought to do something. One has to go somewhere. So in other words, literally what Krishna here is telling us is to walk away from this tree. And this walking away from this tree is equivalent to taking an axe and cutting it down. So asanga means to literally disassociate oneself from this tree. That's equal to cutting it down. And so if we disassociate, where should we go? So from that position, tata padam, from that position, tat parimargitavyam. One should go. Where should one go? Where should one go? Where should one go? Yes, very true. That's exactly what is stated. Yasmin gata. One should go there, to the place, which is a place to, once you get there, you don't come back. That's a place where once you go there, you don't come back. Yasmin gata na nivartanti. Not nivartanti, not coming back. And that's not enough. So, first, let's just dwell on this for a second. What's a place from which one does not come back? In this world, everything cycles all the time. What once is a healthy human body, sometime down the road becomes ashes, stool, fertile soil, etc., etc., which then turns into a tree, a plant, which is then eaten by another, and everything cycles. Everything has a beginning and an end. Now this is a place where you go and you then just are. In other words, Krishna's saying is that one walks away from the temporary and finds eternal. Walks away from temporary, and that's another interesting thing. It's eternally temporary. In the sense that everything is cycling at all times. Whatever one does in this world cannot stay. Whatever arrangements we make for our security, sometime down the road, these arrangements are no good anymore. Whatever job we get, whatever health insurance we may get, whatever country we may move to, there's just no security because things are changing at all times. Like the American economic depression. Who expected economic depression? But it came, and people were afterwards literally dying from hunger. So there's no security in this world, and what's constant in this world is the quality of temporary. So Krishna is saying, so don't stay there, but go to a place where you, having gone, you don't need to go anywhere. Where you can just be. And that's the spiritual world. The idea of spiritual world. And then Krishna adds one more element to it, and that's the element Tameva chadyam purusham adyam purusham. That there, in that place, one should not just go there, but having gone there, one should seek for the adyam purusham, for the inexhaustible, eternal, supreme person, meaning God, meaning Krishna. And what should one do? Do you remember that? Kind of. Prapadye. One should surrender. Yeah, Prabhupada says surrender, but prapad literally means to come forward, go near. And so that is the description. That's just first 4 verses of this chapter, and so they set the theme of this chapter. So this chapter begins and ends with this topic, and that is the topic of liberation. So it describes this world, what's the nature of it, and why should one get away from it, and how should one get away from it, and where should one go. Actually, if you think, it's quite remarkable, because there are many world literatures that don't, religious literatures that don't even communicate this much. But here in the Bhagavad Gita, this was all covered in mere 4 verses. Then, because Krishna has stated here that one should surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, namely Himself, then he goes on to describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. First he describes the spiritual world. Na tad basate suryo, na shashanko napa, etc., etc. Anyhow, no time for that. And then I'll just mention something to conclude this discussion with, because it's stated at the end of this chapter. Srila Prabhupada typically when he in the commentaries on the chapters of Bhagavad Gita, in the commentary on the last verse, Prabhupada would comment on the verse, and then he would begin a new paragraph in which he would comment on the whole chapter, sort of summarizing the whole chapter. So if you read Bhagavad Gita, you can see that Prabhupada did that with each of the chapters. By commenting on the last verse of each chapter, Prabhupada summarized the chapter. And so in this chapter, Srila Prabhupada, for us, summarized the nature of entanglement. Nature of entanglement in this world. And there he said that our entanglement is caused by what he calls, actually took that from Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that's how it goes. Student takes from the teacher, he becomes a teacher, and then he gives to the student, and information goes down. And so he says that there is something that causes entanglement in this world, and he calls it a weakness of the heart. Weakness of the heart. Of course, has nothing to do with the fleshy pump in our chest, but it has something to do with our consciousness. Weakness of the heart. And he says there are 2 aspects to this weakness of the heart. Does anyone perhaps know what are the 2 aspects of the weakness of the heart? You don't remember that, reading that. It's the last paragraph in the commentary to the last verse of the 15th chapter. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you able to find it?
Fall down is caused by desire to lord over material nature.
And?
That one has increased the propensity for lording it over material nature. Attached to matter.
That's it. Those are the 2. So these are the 2 aspects of the weakness of the heart. First one is to lord and enjoy the nature, the material nature. One wants to lord over material nature means that one wants to possess matter. And one wants to possess more and more of this matter. As a matter of fact, and it is really fascinating how prevalent this disease is, that even people who come to religion, and this is the purpose of religion, right? To come out of it. But having come to religion, the person yet again seeks the very same thing. Prays to God, offers donations, oblations, whatnot, has yagyas performed, rituals, but wanting again the same thing. The very same thing that Krishna says that ties one to this world and makes one irreligious or adharmic. That is a desire to possess matter, to be the lord of matter. And more of it, the better. And that's the first weakness of the heart. And then the second weakness of the heart is sort of automatic. Second weakness of the heart is the attachment that grows from it. In other words, one becomes tremendously attached to matter. And in this way, what formulates is the weakness of the heart. This is the essence of evil. I'll read to you, I even here put a quote by Immanuel Kant, who said that immoral people tend to desire to possess things which makes them feel good. In other words, no time, sorry. This one requires a little explanation. From Isha Upanishad, Prabhupada writes, the root of immorality, in other words, the root of evil, is the deliberate disobedience of the laws of nature through disregarding the proprietorship of the Supreme. Disobeying the laws of nature or the order of God brings ruin to a human being. And what's interesting, so again, what Prabhupada describes here as the root of immortality? The root of immortality is disregard of the proprietorship of the Supreme. In other words, that which does not belong to us, which belongs to God, we come to want to have. We want to be proprietors in this world. And Prabhupada says this is the root of immorality or evil. And what's funny, how its root and destroys, Prabhupada says, it brings ruin to a human being. And then the person goes to church, goes to temple or mosque, and then he prays to God to give him a new car, to give him a better job, to give him health so he can possess more matter. And one material thing after another. In other words, God tells him in the Bhagavad Gita what brings about his ruin. And then he comes to God to beg for the ruin. It's absolutely fascinating. Like that friend of mine. Did I tell this here or where did I just remember telling somewhere about a friend of mine who was a brahmachari, but he grew up in a Catholic family. Did I say this in a lecture? Or?
Yeah,
oh, okay. I don't know. I speak every day, so I forget what did I say, what I didn't say, and where I did or did not say it. He just couldn't convince his mother to read Bhagavad Gita. Okay, read Bible. No, wouldn't read the Bible either. She said, I go to church every day. Actually, she said regularly, she doesn't go to church every day. And I pray. And he told her, okay, you pray to God. You talk to God. Why don't you let God talk to you? Nope. No. No, no, and no. And then, of course, then a person comes and prays to God for one's own ruination. It's much more important to open our ear and listen what Krishna has to tell us. And it's written here in the Bhagavad Gita. From Isha Upanishad again, another quote. Take, for example, our dwelling, which is made of earth, wood, stone, iron, cement, and so many other material things. If we think in terms of Sri Isha Upanishad, we must know that we cannot produce any of these building materials ourselves. We can simply bring them together and transform them into different shapes by our labor. A laborer cannot claim to be a proprietor of a thing just because he has worked hard to manufacture it. So, what did Srila Prabhupada say here? In the first quote that I read from Srila Prabhupada, he says that we're not proprietors, that God is the proprietor. And if we want material things, we want to be in the possession of matter, we're actually engaging in the act of our own ruination and ruination of everyone else. And Prabhupada says this is the root of all evil. All people say religion causes wars. No. It is the same it is the materialists in the religious domain who want the possession of matter, power, etc., who fight wars. This is the root of all evil. And then in the second quote, Srila Prabhupada tells us why, explains us, gives us example. He is trying to feed our intelligence so we can fight our demons, so to speak. Why we're not proprietors? How can we understand that we're not proprietors? Do you remember from what I just read, what's the answer? How or why we're not proprietors? We cannot produce a thing. We can only go out and gather stuff, mix it all together. We get a brick, but how did brick come about? Where'd you get the dirt? Did you make dirt? No, it was there before you. We make glass. This building has glass windows. Where did glass come from? Oh, from the factory. Where did they get the ingredients to make the glass? From sand. Where'd you get sand from? In other words, we cannot produce anything. We're simply combining stuff. We cannot produce anything. Therefore, it's not ours. As a matter of fact, everything was there before we came, and it will be there after we leave. So it is not ours. Everything belongs to Krishna. And so therefore it's stated, to repeat again, that one should cut off this tree, which actually is not a real tree. It's simply reflecting. It's a reflection of a real tree, and it's reflecting on the lake of our desire. And how do we cut it? By walking away from it. Literally walking away from it. In other words, paying it no attention. Asanga, meaning cut the relationship. With the acts of detachment, Krishna says. And then from there we go and we seek that permanent place, not this temporary place. We seek permanent place, and in that permanent place we seek the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and there we lay our heads. And our loving propensities and everything can be engaged there with God. Up until then, there's really not much value to our religious conduct and our religious aspirations, etc. As the Shastra says, Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya Jati Shastra Japastapaha Apranasyeva Dehasya Mandanam Loka Ranjanam. That without this dedication, surrender and devotion to God, through the process of bhakti, Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya, devoid of Hinasya, devoid of this service to God, devotion to God, dedication to God. Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya Jati, good birth. Shastra, knowledge of scripture, religious scripture. Jati, Shastra, Japas, chanting of the mantras. Tapasya, performance of austerities. All of this is useless. Apranasyeva dehasya. All of this is just like a body without life. Like a dead body, well decorated. What's the use of it? So that is, these are not my words. I'm just repeating what the scripture says. And yet this is the religion of most of the people, unfortunately. In all traditions. This is cross-tradition friendly software. This disease. Apranasyeva dehasya and mandanam, lokaranjanam. And this kind of religious understanding is simply meant to entertain the foolish. To entertain the foolish people of this world. As they don't understand this, they, in the name of religion, they're just perpetuating the same old story. They just call it religion, but really it isn't. So, that is the topic of the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And then in between the beginning and the end, we have Krishna describing himself, so that we can understand a little bit about Krishna, and so that we can actually become attracted to Krishna, instead of the possession and enjoyment of matter. So, this was a 1 minute late delivery, and 1 minute over time. But perhaps if there is a quick question or comment. Yes.
Last sloka you quoted, why is this bad? What was the reason for just being the entertainment for the tradition?
Yes, the claim is that things which are considered otherwise very good, namely good birth, meaning birth in an aristocratic family, birth in a rich family, birth in America, I don't know about that. Then the knowledge of the Shastra, knowledge of the scripture, performance of austerities, chanting of the mantras or prayers, all of this is useless. It's like a dead body or decoration on a dead body. And it's merely meant to entertain the foolish materialists who have come to God, if it's devoid of devotion to God. That's the first thing. Bhagavat Bhakti Hinasya. Bhagavat Bhakti Hinasya. So devoid of devotion to God, all of these things are just like decorations on a dead body. And that's wonderfully described in this chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter. Again, Bhagavad Gita is a very condensed work. It's a lot is said in mere 700 verses. So they're very concise, and it's really something that you ideally would read with great attention and meditate upon, and ultimately one should learn Bhagavad Gita from a spiritual master. That way it goes the fastest. But it requires a good deal of attention. Okay. Thank you for your attention. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki